if I have looked at my live afterwards, what I've noticed is there's more cut off at the start than I usually think. So I'm just going to wait just a minute before I start introducing what we're going to talk about. So why don't you look at my wall while I just actually go and get some water to have. Right. So I've got my water because no doubt I'll need that. And what are we going to talk about? We're going to just throw around some idea, we're just going to play the game of, okay, well, if that happened, does it make sense? Why would this happen now, sort of thing? Okay, so hey Mark, how are you? Have you been following? I guess you probably have been. Actually, you've been following the newest outrageous releases that are going on with DELPHI. I thought, well, okay, well, why don't we think about this and just, I have no conclusion to give you, okay, of my own, but we could play the what if game and decide whether, okay, why now? Does this make sense? And is Carroll County special when it comes to this kind of scandal, these kind of murders, and the kind of shenanigans that seem to be going on in politics and in the prison system? Now, clearly, I'm Australian. Clearly, I don't live in Indiana. So simply by those reasons, by that reasoning, I really can only even know 1% of what people can know. I do wish there were more people from DELPHI speaking up at their council meetings and loudly about all sorts of things. It shouldn't be up to YouTubers, even if they live in Indiana or nearby in Indianapolis or whatever it is, right? So Mark says he's following it. Defense seems to be reaching, in my opinion. So yeah, so we'll talk about it. Hi Connor, how are you? Thanks for popping in so regularly these days. It's nice to see people back. I don't know who else is here. Apparently there's 4 people. That's all right. They don't need to say hello. I once got really shitty about that, but it doesn't really matter. I didn't really mean it. Lurkers are welcome. We need to consider things like, what are we going to consider? We're going to consider the Norse religion, pagan, heathen, Nordic religion versus, and Asatru, which is a bit more modern, but versus people who rape and pillage from these religions. They steal their symbology, they make up their own symbols, and they often, the people, it's people that connect to Odinism itself, and they're not Odinites, as keeps getting reported. It's Odinism and Odinists. They generally are closely related to white supremacy. So, that might be a reason why, people wearing patches are saying, hey, this isn't anything to do with Odin, because they know they're relating themselves to white supremacy. I've got all sorts of crappy notes here, so this is going to be really terrible. But let's just get going, okay? So we know it's Richard Matthew Allen. He was There was a search warrant taken out last year in September, and the judge, I think it was Judge Dina, who signed off on that search warrant, rapidly recused himself so that he wouldn't have any more involvement. And he was saying it was for health and safety and well-being of his family because, of the bloodlust, meaning coming from YouTubers, okay, I think, generally. But, it's interesting the terminology that he uses, because if he was frightened that he might do the wrong thing by the Odinists by not, let's see, it doesn't really make sense, right? But, and he wanted to leave it up to someone else. But let's talk about what makes sense and what doesn't. I'll try and keep on track. Sorry, we're off on a bad foot already. And he was arrested in October 2022. There are interviews, of course, that we haven't heard. Now, we know when cases go through, think about all the channels, for example, on here, Dreading and JCS. I think there's so many. Matt Orchard is a really good one. But they play a lot of the interviews and they give their commentary on it. Let's trust that Richard Allen's interviews with Carroll County, investigators and state investigators, federal investigators, whomever's interviewed him, let's hope that they are all recorded, hopefully video-wise. We'll be able to see for ourselves, won't we? One day, if Rick Allen isn't set free, one day we might be seeing Rick Allen's interviews and having people make commentary and talk about those pivotal moments in his interviews. But we don't know. So what have I written here? So he's in Westville Correctional Facility. I can't remember, but I think it's 1 hour. I think it's north and from Delphi. Thinking about all the corruption that goes on in Carroll County, thinking about what law enforcement officers are there, whether they're in a sheriff's department or something else. Why are people that are swearing that Richard Allen is innocent, he's being treated very poorly, why would they want him to go to a county jail where they're not safe? You ask Greeno how safe he thinks Delphi jail is on Main Street West in Delphi. That jail, it's undermanned, under-resourced. These county jails don't have a lot of money because the counties don't have a lot of money, do they? And we know that they like to send the money into maybe all the wrong places and they're struggling for funds. Why are they going to send it on people being held on remand or who've been charged and their charges were such that they don't go to prison but they can remain in county jail? So there's 30 people being held there, maybe with one person to watch them, one jailer. And that jailer can be a victim too, maybe, of that thin blue line. It would be the thin brown line, wouldn't it, in Carroll County, thinking about the sheriff's uniforms. Because not only can law enforcement officers bully civilians and run amok in very unlawful ways, they can also bully other officers. And there are officers that are very vulnerable to being used, being coerced, being recruited, just keeping quiet. It's a really damaging thing for some officers. Good cops loathe bad cops and law enforcement officers just as much as the public do. And I think it's something that young people need to consider when they're going into these law enforcement agencies. They need to consider how they're going to cope with that line and the cult aspect of law enforcement. But I can tell you now that if Richard Allen is put into county jail, he's not safe, is he? Why would he be safe then if everything that people are saying and conjecturing or projecting and theorizing, if it's all true, they're just going to kill him? You're saying he's in danger now? Well, there's nothing stopping officers walking into county jail, especially those officers with power, and they know they can do it. And we know they can, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Hi, JK. Westville is north about 70 miles. Yeah, so it might be about an hour's drive. In Westville, now, so of course there's religious liberty, okay? There's religious liberty. This relates to people working in law enforcement, and it relates to people everywhere. We've got a right to practice our own religion. This does include Nordic pagan heathenism, and it includes being a Muslim, being Jewish, being Christian, etc. And in prison, prisoners have the right to have meetings, to get together to do what they want to do with regards to their belief system. As long as they have 5, then the prison will support it. This is true, this is current, so you've probably heard people talk about, well, they can have meetings. In prison, whether there are more than 5 Odinist prisoners or not, to date, nobody is having these meetings. Okay, so they might decide that they don't want to be outwardly known as white supremacists. They could be meeting, communicating privately anyway, right? But they're just deciding not to have a formal meeting that they're allowed to have. But it's not to say that there aren't more than 5 white supremacist Odinists in Westville prison as prisoners. It's probably likely that there are, because sadly, that's fact. It's also, anyway, actually I won't jump ahead. So who were these officers that Rick Allen's defense attorneys say were wearing badges, were threatening him, and that people are now taking that to mean they coerced him into confessing? So it's Randy. You probably all know this, but we're going to talk about it because I want to go, does it matter, does it not? So Randy Jones and Joshua Robinson, to me it appears, I think, from what I can understand, but I'm always happy to be wrong and be corrected, so please let me know here on comments. I feel like they're quite young and they might be new to correctional officer work. I'm not quite sure though, or at least they're quite fresh to Westville, and they started wearing patches in March. Now we need to be thinking, what is this end game here? If law enforcement is corrupt, if they know, say, that white supremacy, I mean, number one, these were white girls that were murdered. And so the only way we seem to be able to say, how is this possible through white supremacy, terrorism? Oh, well, it has to be related to Flora fires. 10 minutes to the east, 10 miles to the east, 9 miles to the east is a little town called Flora. In November 2016, Galen Roses for young children, all burnt in a fire. So is this the only way people are making link to white supremacy? I'm not sure. But why, if they think they're going to be home and hosed, they've got a patsy, they've planted some evidence, you know, a bullet, which I don't think seems to be very important. I'm not sure what was giving them the frights that they thought they've got to activate something else and now frighten them. Why would they out themselves as white supremacists possibly and be so overt with everything and highlight this theory again from way back of a ritualistic killing. Why would they do that? Isn't there another way to do it? Were they starting to think in March when Randy and Joshua started wearing these badges, which they say are not related to Odin, are not hate, are not about cultism. It's just about their higher power, just as if you're wearing the cross. What you know, if they were told, hey, we've got to start applying some sort of pressure, it's you guys, you're it. Put these patches on. They did that in March. You've got to think, well, does this make sense? Why would they activate this course of action? What was failing about the course of action of having someone framed for the murders already? However, so it was on April the 3rd that Richard Allen, so this year, so in March, they started wearing the patches. These guys both say, I wasn't ever one-on-one with Allen. Well, what does that mean? Things happened when you were both there together. We never exerted more force than we had to. In fact, we were being extra gentle. We only had to tase him twice. And they've been told since September the 19th for Joshua and September the 22nd as of this year for Randy to not wear their badges. Hi, Mel Mac. We're just going through, I'm just talking about Westville Prison, the people that were wearing the badges since March. It was, if they're playing mind games with Alan, it really worked quickly, didn't it? Because April the 3rd, he confessed on the telephone to his wife. Apparently in one call, he made 5 confessions. We don't know what it says, just like we haven't seen his interviews before his arrest, right? On April the 5th, I think it was, the Daily Mail came out with the article that Alan's attorneys, were releasing information that Alan has been kept in this concrete box, and that he's been really badly treated. He's in a cell. They didn't build an extra small, especially for Alan, did they? He's in a cell like all other prisoners have been before. I know he's on remand and he hasn't been charged, so he's not really a prisoner, but at the same time, he's in facilities that have been used by so many people for years. He's not been given something especially awkward, uncomfortable. It is just what it is. He probably has better access there to medical treatment, psychiatric treatment. I understand the problem where his lawyers, that he's got the difficulty of feeling isolated, but he's probably safer. And I know people will be saying, but he's not safe because of the white supremacists. Why would white supremacists give a shit about Richard Allen? Because he killed 2 white little girls. Huh? Also, what's going to be a problem, and I don't think the case will go to trial in January, but I wish it would. I think Richard Allen needs a hearing now, but I also think it needs to go to trial. Going to and from that jail would be really tricky, and I think something needs to happen so that he can be transported, to and fro on the days that he needs to appear in court, because logistically, it's going to be a real nightmare. And again, a lot of the trouble is resources, isn't it? I won't say your name out loud, FQ. Hi, though. Okay, so you've got to think about that, right? Why would white supremacists kill 2 little girls? Maybe, okay, maybe the thought is that because 2 little girls were linked somehow to somebody that would get them into trouble for killing some black children. But we're going to talk about what really happens with white supremacy, brutality, and terrorism in America. It's very unlikely that they would get prosecuted anyway. All right, so what I've always tried to do going into true crime now is stay away from letting my mind run away with me when words have meaning, names have meaning, because if you've ever suffered from anything, any psychosis, if you've ever been a paranoid schizophrenic or anything like that, you might understand that the way things link and the way you can get deeply entrenched, you can go down a black hole and you might never get out. And what happens is you start making connections with things that are just that actually have no link, but you see it, you really believe it, and you don't see how illogical is, or you don't see where those breaks are. You don't, it's very strange. So I try not to get caught up in things like the repetition of Germanic, liberty, being a place and being the girl and having meaning, and all of that sort of thing, right? Because it's very unhealthy. It really intrigues people. It gets them carried away, though it can cause hysteria. They really imbue such depth of meaning onto things. It creates a whole lot of bias towards something that might necessarily not be important. Exactly, JK. Oh, what do you mean? They might have gotten information because once he's in the prison system, once he's been charged, information that wasn't available to people earlier, although we've had some clue, now they might have seen what he did if he did it. And being very angry that he's been trying to stage something to look like a ritualistic murder that might come from a particular group, and they don't like it. You can see there's so many things to discuss. You'd just be talking for hours, talking all about this nitty gritty and each little facet, eh? So there's a person called Michael German. Now, I don't really believe he writes his own bio sort of for Wiki, I think, because it seems very, I don't know. Anyway, he's an ex-FBI agent. He's been involved in a lot of anti-terrorism, domestic terrorism investigations in America. And he wrote an article for the Brennan Center for Justice, which you can look up and you can download and you can read, okay? He wrote this August 27, 2020, and it's called Hidden in Plain Sight. So this is another term that crops up everywhere, right? Sometimes it's just because that's how things are, but, hiding in plain sight. We talk about the FBI using this terminology for serial killers, and indeed, we know that many a serial killer have been hiding in plain sight, some of them being involved in the community, in a more formal way, so being advocates for this and working with police for that or whatever, or they've been, as Ted Bundy were working for a suicide hotline, but we know of so many cases where they were just these people that used these the mask of a wife and child, use them as puppets in their vaudeville act, so that they could look like they were regular people, but those people were just covers, weren't they? So they're hiding in plain sight. So hidden in plain sight, racism, white supremacy, and far-right militancy in law enforcement. So throughout America and to this very day, it's just a fact that white supremacy is deeply ingrained in law enforcement, and that's whether it's sheriff officers in the police department, in prison systems, working in prison systems, etc. Okay, it's just a fact. And what else is a fact is when people are known to be racist, to belong to various groups, to hold certain views, it's ignored. There's a blind eye turned unless there is a scandal. And then what normally happens is, instead of being charged and held accountable, your counties, your states, if you're in America, forks out to the tune of probably I know definitely tens of millions of dollars. It would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars now, probably over the decades. That's what happens, is they pay out, and there's not a lot of people that lose their jobs that are, terminated or anything like that. Okay, so Michael German asserts that the government response to known connections of law enforcement to violent, racist, and militant groups has been strikingly insufficient. And we should note, there is nothing special about Carroll County when it comes to this. We do hear more than whispers about families in the county and how racist they are, especially when we've been talking about fluorophile. And if you think of, let's just say, let's say what Anthony Greeno alleged Randall Dennis Sr. said to him, about the N-word don't last long around here. And then Greeno was put in jail for a little bit, and the American Association for the, I can't remember their name, but they support African American, or sorry, I don't want to use the wrong term, and I just say black, I don't know. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but there's a organization, and they helped him get out. I think he was going to interview Randall or something, or had just interviewed him. Hi, Kit. Thanks for doing that, whatever that was. Thank you. How are you? Everyone should be tuning into Kit. She is a brilliant person. So, moving on. Sorry. But yeah, there is no discipline. There is no termination unless there's a public scandal. And until the civil rights movement, which was sort of getting into full stride in the mid-60s, the KKK was all too common in law enforcement. And you can't achieve fairness when white supremacists are hiding throughout police departments and sheriff offices, etc. Can you? Okay. And of all the cases that the FBI investigate and they want to litigate or charge or whatever, 5% of them result in charges. This is just not on. So FBI and the Department of Homeland Security state that white supremacists are the most lethal domestic terrorists in the USA. Rampages, bombs, even, racial attacks on other officers if they are not white. Okay, and just think of all the payouts. It's many millions are paid out for hate crimes. These people don't end up in jail. They probably just get other jobs, right? Carroll County is no exception. Okay, Carroll County is no more racist in law enforcement. It could even be less than a lot of places. Okay, in the 80s you've got the KKK fire bombings. In the 90s in California, the Linwood Vikings. There were sheriffs that were, you know, going out and brutally shooting people and just committing acts of terrorism and lawlessness. Just this wanton abuse of power. There's neo-Nazi groups, and there were 60 lawsuits and $55 million. Okay, $55 million. Is that justice? That's taking away from communities, isn't it? That money is taking. Hi, John Smith. John Smith might have a few negative things to say. I can't remember if it's him or this Jeff Jones that thinks that I'm a neo-Nazi supporter. But he's abusive kid. Thank you. So, yeah, internal discipline. What does that mean? A desk job for 6 months? You know? 2001 in Texas, a deputy sheriff in Texas was actively recruiting into the KKK. He was recruiting officers. In 2009, Florida, 3 officers in the KKK, they were charged for, can't remember, sorry. These are just a few glimpses. 2015, an officer was actually fired in Louisiana. He gave a Nazi salute at a Klan rally, and I think it was captured on video. Hi, Perry. That's excluding what it costs to investigate these officers and pay them while they're on paid leave. Yeah. Yep. I mean, what about just disciplinary action? We've got to decide, you know, what is religious liberty and what is racism that we no longer want as a tenet of our society. We all need to face that every one of us comes from a people that at some time or other, doesn't matter where you are in the world, what your ancestry is, going back to the start, we are all from hominoids who commit sacrifice. Animal sacrifice, where we are from peoples who commit human sacrifice, and we've got to decide what is religious liberty set up to protect. Is racism a religion? How can it be practiced? How is that belief system going to be acceptable in society? You know, so do you say, well, you can be racist and you can meet as a racist group, but you know, if you're taking actions that are against our human societal laws right now, well, you'll be charged just like everybody else. It doesn't seem to be the message that we're giving when white supremacists are allowed, maybe just because, hey, they're allowed their right to be in law enforcement, and then they're not charged, and other people are for crimes that are nowhere near as heinous and disgusting, right? So what messages are these? What is going on here? Why this padding for these people, right? Hello, Melmac. Hi, Brian. Brian says parts of the Bible were deleted over history. Yeah, of course. No, I don't believe in editing, but editing happens throughout history all the time. We're rewriting history all the time, okay? And, you might think that that might be for your own good, but it's also rewritten quite badly, isn't it? If it means that women are to subjugate to everybody, or, history's rewritten all the time. So in 2019 in Michigan, a KKK flag was raised after Confederate flag was burned down. This is by law enforcement officers. 2020 in Wilmington. Isn't that where the Clintons? Isn't Wilmington where a lot of huge corporations, global corporations, have their head office because of the laws that protect them, tax havens and things like that? Pretty sure that's where old Killary. I'm reasonably well. I probably don't sound too well. I'm very tired all the time. I haven't been well, but I'm trying to get better. And I've been very depressed. And that's making it hard to make content and everything. I'm just in a rut. But I hope hope to get out of it. But I think I've probably been depressed my whole life, so it doesn't matter. So Wilmington, 3 LE were fired. They were heard discussing in the most, just very revolting way. They were talking about making a lot of racial slurs. They were talking about wanting to just go out and brutally slay black people. And there was a black officer that they were heard talking about. They wanted to brutally kill that officer. And also, oh my God, they were saying that they cannot wait for martial law so that they can just go out and commit the crimes that would just make their little hearts overflow with joy. Yeah. Are these the people that you want protect and serve? How can they protect and serve? We might laugh at TikToks. The only way I see TikToks are on YouTube. But, we might laugh at sometimes when these, look at that drunken woman. She's so spoiled, and she's just saying, you're doing this because I'm black. You're doing it because I'm black. But, there's that truth in there that sometimes it's officers that are just obviously so great, such amazing people. They handle the shit so well, and they're getting accused of racism when they're being nothing but respectful, professional, lawful. So we laugh at those, but there is the dark side to that, a very deep truth. 2020. San Jose, 4 officers were suspended because they were running an anti-Muslim Facebook page. And they would say things like, Black lives don't really matter. Now, I despise the Black Lives Movement. I think the movement, that organization, the people that began that are just grifters and assholes and cheaters and disgusting people. That movement, movements get, really ruined by, things that really do matter. Human rights movements in general. And when you have movements like BLM and what they really are about, it's setting everyone back, and it actually creates racial tension. So, white supremacy, it's really a thing. So, is it possible that officers in Westville were wearing patches? Now, people are saying they were these certain I hate people ones and everything. I just thought maybe it might be the triangles. They are saying that they are Nordic heathen pagans, or Nordic pagan heathens, and they're not about Odin, they're not about hate, they're not about They're not a cult, okay? But, you know, the timing is, I guess, interesting. But maybe if you've got a very weak mind, maybe just the appearance of those patches in the mind of a psychopath who tried to frame similar people, yeah, maybe you might go a little bit crazy. But, you know, what we're being told, we need to unlearn what we're learning in our public schools. Yeah, that's probably true. Hello, Perry. Yes, one day at a time. What was I saying? You know, the timing is interesting, isn't it, right? And that's what defense are insinuating, well, more than insinuating. So the defense is saying that it was a ritualistic kill. They're saying that the scene depicts it and that it's a legitimate scene. They're saying that, you know, the way Abby and Libby were placed and the way that the branches were placed on them are legitimate runes. And they're saying the markings on the tree is a legitimate rune. Now, they're not. But the thing about these pagan groups, let alone Odinist groups, are that they do make up their own symbols. It's very about, in these religions are about individualism, and they do have their own language. But Brad Holder, in one of his posts, that little F with the downward strokes, stands for communication and ancestry and inspiration. What's that got to do with killing two girls? I'm not quite sure. That F is also on, if you look up the Burnished Raven, it's a Norse pagan provisions and ritual items store. They've got, you can buy items to use in your rituals, okay? You can't see it here, so if you go online and look at their logo for the Burnished Raven, raven is the word down here. The letter A for raven, they've written using that F. So you could say, is it an A on the tree in Libby's blood? Well, when you look at that picture of the tree that's circulating, and I'm so sorry that I'm not using a program to do this so that I can just bring this up on screen for you. That would be just too helpful, wouldn't it? That it's very over exposed, that picture, and it looks like there's a very strong, but in actual fact you can see that, you know, that little blood splatter picture that is being shown, it actually does look like that. You can see that there's not only just these marks, like there's a smear that goes up and then sort of it looks like two lines, but there are the dots over here, and it does look like there's little dots there, and there is a little bit down here. And I actually believe it is more like what was shown in the graphic. But whether or not somebody was writing on a tree or it's Libby's handprint, I mean, there is Libby's blood on the tree. They probably can't make a link though, and it doesn't tie into Richard Allen being, you know, being treated how they say he is in prison and everything to link the Kleins. So, okay, so these Germanic religions, there's sort of what's practiced in Europe and then America. They seem to be quite different things, and it is true that they have been bastardized to other religions who use them to hide their white supremacy and things like that, right? And that is generally Odinist groups that have stolen from the newer Asatru. And it's Asatru, which is quite a modern version, who introduced to the Nordic calendar, Norse calendar, which does not have Valisblot, doesn't have a sacrifice blot on Valentine's Day, February the 14th, okay? That is not Nordic at all. It is a modern thing that was introduced just to bring something into the calendar for these believers on that day so that they could have a ritual day relating to February the 14th. And it's Asatru that the Odinists have mostly nicked from. That whole belief that it's something to do with February the 14th, of course, ties into the theory that the girls were murdered on the 14th, that they were held alive somewhere. So kidnapped, held alive, maybe in a shack, they say, and then brought back to the scene probably around 2 o'clock, okay? This is what people say. This is such a big logistical undertaking, isn't it? So, look, I'll just read you a little bit about modern day Odinists have been linked to violence mainly in prisons and against minority groups or people who practice other religions. Odinism, according to the Anti-Defamation League, is a term frequently given to a racist variant of the Norse pagan religion known as Asatru, a religious sect that attempts to revive ancient Norse religious beliefs and practices of pre-Christian Europe. And people in Iceland, for example, are very, very upset by white supremacy hijacking their religion. They are really pissed off about it. What's this? Evidence found at the crime scene consisted of symbols in the form of runes made up of sticks and fashioned with tree branches, which defense attorneys said were obvious signatures left behind by Odinites. It's Odinists. Okay. Also, the professors, one of them, said, it looks like an attempt to replicate, okay? They don't look like anything, and it is an attempt to replicate, most likely. Now, that could be because each Nordic pagan heathen or Odinist can make up their own symbols, so it could have personal meaning to them, but they certainly aren't anything in the known alphabets and, runic groupings that I've looked at, and I looked at quite a few. Like the term pagan, a heathen historically referred to people who weren't Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. The word heathen is recorded before the year 900, and the Middle English term stems from German. Heath refers to uncultivated land. The first heathens were people who lived in what is now England, Scandinavia, and Germany before Christianity became the predominant religion. Heathen is also similar to pagan in that it can be used in a derogatory way to mean someone who is uncultured. And that's probably what 21 Pilots were talking about with heathens. I think that song was written for the Suicide Squad movie. Margot Robbie playing, what's her name again? She's from New York. Someone will know. Yeah, it drives me nuts, Connor, when they say Odinites. It's just, try harder to work out what you meant, what the right term is. And the song 21 Heathens, and, there's a whole lot of write-up about that song that, this is the song that Kelsey German said Libby and Abby were listening to with her in the car on the way to the bridge. I do have an issue about that car drive because there are different routes you can go, but just basically leaving from the house, doing one route and then the other, and then connecting up and coming around from Ron Logan's. And each time Becky described that, she would describe this loop here coming up the road and not going past Hoover Harvest Store. And then the way that Kelsey went was to come and swoop round around Anderson's, past where the ballpark is now, and come down. And that way she'd go past Hoover Harvest Store to Mears and then leave again. Anyway, don't want to get into that. Today, heathenry envelopes a number of beliefs and practices. These go by different names, including Asatru, Odinism, and Germanic pagan reconstructionism. Asatru is officially recognized as a religion in Iceland, with practices that focus on peace, ancestors, and equality. Heathenry also recognizes a number of gods of Germanic and Nordic origin, such as Twi, Odin, Thor, and Frigg, as well as wights, which are spiritual beings connected to nature. Unlike Wicca and some forms of paganism, those who practice heathenry don't put much of a focus on magic and witchcraft. Instead, gods and ancestors are at the center of the religion. At the base of the terms pagan, Wicca, and heathen is respect for nature and multiple gods. Where the emphasis lies, however, depends on which you're referring to. Blot, which is Old Norse, and blot or G-blot in Old English are terms for blood sacrifice in Norse paganism and Anglo-Saxon paganism, respectively. A comparison can also be reconstructed for wider Germanic paganism. A blot could be dedicated to any of the Germanic gods, the spirits of the land, and to ancestors. And you'd be wanting to do certain rituals at certain times of year. First you'd want to be appeasing whatever, is bringing the season in, appeasing whatever's bringing the snow and the cold, wanting to make sure that I'm just making this up here, but, making sure that you're going to be able to survive the winter and, be sheltered enough and have enough food and be secure from predators like other humans and wild animals. And then, you'd probably have to have rituals to send that away and then to welcome in spring and things like that, right? In the early 2000s in Indiana, a racist skinhead group called the Vinlanders Social Club, who identified as Odinists, formed in Indiana. Well, you just said in Indiana. Whoever wrote this wasn't very good. I'd tell you, but I can't remember. They grew to be one of the largest and most hardcore racist skinhead groups in the country, but by the mid-2010s, membership had largely filtered out. We've spoken before here about, there was an attempt at resurgence of the KKK in these recent years, in the last 20 years, but by the mid-2010s, membership had largely filtered out. I guess they just go more underground, right? Still, others remain entrenched in the state's prison system. Odinism is fairly common among white supremacist prison gang members in Indiana. You've got two large gangs, the Indiana Aryan Brotherhood and the Saxon Knights, present in the Indiana prison system. It gets a little complicated because religious groups in prison can get certain privileges, like meetings and so forth. And so some people claim to be of a particular religion without necessarily wholeheartedly believing in it, said Dr. Mark Pitcabbage, who is a historian and authority on extremism in the United States with the Anti-Defamation League. He too reiterated that not all Norse paganists are white supremacists. Why people don't seem to understand this is beyond me. Before we took religion into human-made structures, people would worship it in nature, ancient trees, rivers, lakes, etc. That's why we respected our environment and felt attached to it. Yeah, Dreamtime in Australia and, the fables and myths of the Māori in New Zealand, you know, coming from Polynesia. But yeah, it was all about the sun, Ra, and, you know, the ocean and the taniwha in the ocean. And people paid attention to nature, didn't they? You know, when invaders go to certain countries, they often really struggle because they can't support themselves, because they don't understand about seasons and things about wildfires and how cleansing things are, and they don't pay attention to what the indigenous people are doing, and they just want to throw down all their own practices and beliefs. And, you know, I think it means that it slows down their integration into new land. But anyway, he reiterated, not all Norse paganists are white supremacists. The overall desire for white supremacists to claim facets of European paganism as a philosophical harbour for racist beliefs took off in earnest in the mid-19th century as European states sought to reclaim a sense of shared national identity and reached back to a perceived, often erroneous, shared heritage to do so. Symbols were an easy way to do that. White supremacists like symbols. They borrow symbols from a lot of different places or create their own symbols, and then they use them in a variety of ways, and that includes, but is not limited to, Norse pagan symbols, Pitcairn said. Despite the prevalence of terms referenced now by the US-based white supremacist groups, Nordic heathen or broadly European pagan belief systems do not reflect the racist ideals of the organizations now co-opting their symbolism. This kind of Nordic mythology fit in well with groups who talked about conquering and being a warrior for your cause and for your homeland and your race. So it was really bastardized and then exploited in a new toxic venom. This was quoting another guy called Levin. By World War II, leaders of the Third Reich would often incorporate symbolic elements of European paganism into nationalistic ideologies to the extent that it was relevant for them to do, according to Dr. Matthias Nordvig, who is a professor specializing in pre-Christian Nordic mythologies at University of Colorado Boulder's Nordic department. Perhaps people should be reaching out to Dr. Matthias Nordvig, Professor of Pre-Christian Nordic Mythologies at the Uni of Colorado in Boulder in the Nordic department. Although, you know, I hear that Harvard's all right as well. But I hear that, Ivy League isn't so much anymore a league. It was more language and symbolism that could signal to the general population that we represent this thing as Germanic heritage, and they did the same thing with Christianity and used the churches in Germany to spread their propaganda. Still, of all the terms rooted in European paganism contained in the court filing, this was taken from, anyway, it doesn't matter. Odinism is the one that experts today say hints most strongly at affiliations with white supremacy. It's really used in Europe. So, you know, when you're thinking of white supremacy, don't just think of people that are, you know, how there's quite a lot of bullying maybe even going on online of these people, and they're just out in the woods, they're wearing their costumes, they are saying their rituals, and why not? People go to church and say rituals. They burn incense. They eat the blood, eat the body and drink the blood of Christ. And what? No one's saying peep about that? There's a thing to keep in mind with Odinism, that it has, from the beginning, been associated with the white supremacist interpretation of Nordic paganism. So there are very few people who call themselves Odinists who don't admit to some level of sympathy for white supremacy, says Nordvig. And, the defense is using Odinism not paganism, okay? So why are the defense using white supremacists, saying that white supremacists killed Abby and Libby? Unless maybe it's related to Flora and the murder, possible murder in this fire of these 4 girls, because why would they kill 2 white girls? You know, that would get you a little bit pissed off, wouldn't it, if you were an Odinist? So when did they start saying this? Was it just that, yeah, they just, as we were saying before, was it just because they got wind of what was in the documents about the crime scene and they were pissed off? Well, you know, why would Odinists in particular be pissed off? Well, because it's related to death, blood. But, you know, you'd think the Nordic pagans and the heathens would be just as pissed off, right? Because it's appropriating symbols. But, you know, they're not the aggressive ones, are they? A more complicated term is asatru, which also pops up in the Carroll County filing. That term refers to the general worship of Nordic gods and goddesses, and asatru has been officially recognized as a religion in Iceland since 1972. In tracking whether certain groups have ties to white supremacist organizations, Nordvig says he tends to find European references to asatru talking about the original European pagan belief system. Those groups are often not racist. However, references to asatru in the United States are more likely to have ties to white supremacist groups. The use of the word asatru by white supremacists has prompted many of the pagan faiths to do away with the term altogether, you know, to stop using asatru, because it's asatru, that branch of this religion, which is actually, you know, it's quite broad. All of these religions are quite broad in their practices, very individualistic, but it's that one that has introduced Valor's blot that people are making a big deal about just because these girls disappeared on February the 13th. We all know a lot of the conspiracies around that. Libby was killed earlier, Abby was then lured, and all of that. But then if February the 14th is so important, Valor's blot, why was Libby killed on the 12th or the 11th, as they say? It doesn't make sense. It points even more to staging. If Libby was killed somehow in an accident or by the family in rage, as some people say, you know, then it's more staging and using Odinism to hide it, to make it look more like they were killed on the 14th, you know, casting doubt on did they die on the 13th. See how big everything needs to get? Hello, Risley Regard. Religion and putting the fear of God into people is a great way to police society without being physically present, says Brian. I've seen in recent years that people who identify with the more liberal ideology lean towards Norse paganism as a term and shy away from asatru because, as they say, it has been tainted by co-opted by different white supremacist and extreme right organizations. But on the other hand, in Europe, asatru is the common term in Europe. If you say asatru, people would not necessarily associate that term with any form of extremism. Allen's attorneys claim several people with direct ties to Odinism were dismissed as potential suspects early on in the investigation without reason. Law enforcement's failure to actively pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism, again, not with North paganism, with specifically Odinism, you know, white supremacist groups, in the killing of these white girls. Is confounding, Ellen's defense team wrote in filing. Ellen's defense team claimed lead investigators involved in the Delphi murder investigation consulted with a Purdue professor concerning what resembled, according to them, pagan symbols, possibly Odinist in nature, that were left behind at the crime scene no later than February 2018. Yeah. Is it? That's the Brad Holder Vinlander sign. Sorry, let me just yeah, actually, yeah. So Brad Holder. Now people wonder, why was Becky Patty mentioning people? I mean, if you're the family of a murdered girl, you are trying to find every lead you can too. And if you come across something online, you might be about to go to law enforcement and make sure they're following things that you find interesting. It doesn't mean you're trying to create a red herring or anything, right? So Brad Holder, he was the what do they call it? The Gothi, so Gothi. He is the leader of the chapter, the Logansport chapter of, their group. And Patrick Westfall is now the Gothi. About on 5th of February 2017, Brad Holder announced he was stepping down as Gothi because he thought that their religion or their group was communicating too much just online, in the virtual world. He didn't think they were doing what was required in terms of proselytizing, I guess, going out and traveling, he wanted to be a traveling Gothi, help people set up kindreds. I guess that's what they call their parish or something. Set up kindreds in Indiana and, make it real and less virtual. And he wanted to have more meet and greets and more study groups and things. So I guess, he was someone that was looking at growth and everything, just like Perry says, even if it was ritualistic, I don't see how they can prove it's Odinist in nature. Just as easily it could be a wacko staging the crime scene. I mean, they've got the issue where it is two white girls, and it's such a ridiculous reach to say it's because Anna Williams was dating a black man. But then, obviously that makes Abby the target. But then, isn't it just also risky, right? Thinking that they cannot get caught and thinking, we know that there's enough racist mofos in law enforcement here that, if they realize that this is us, maybe they won't try and find us. So maybe that is why we make it obvious that it was us, so that they don't try and prosecute us. There's so many weird ways you have to speak. Thank you for subscribing and pushing a like button, Perry. Yes, Brian. Everybody has an idea of what a ritualistic scene looks like, even if it's from watching the X-Files or, True Detective season 1, right? So, okay. So that's Brad Holder. You would have heard the name Elvis Fields. Very strange person. He is someone that could be old, could be young. He's very hard to put an age on. And Patrick Westfall. So Patrick Westfall is now the Gothi of that kindred. He took over from Brad Holder. People talk about there being a having been a falling out between Brad and Patrick. Maybe that, I don't know, I don't have access to, I don't watch all their Facebooks and everything. Maybe there is proof of an argument, or maybe they're just conjecturing because Brad's stepped down and Patrick's taking over, and they just are making out that there was some sort of coup. I wanted to, yeah. I'll just quickly say it now. So we know that these murders were called the Snapchat murders, and you know, people like to make a meal of things such as Mike Patty saying, you know, if it wasn't for the Snapchat at 2:30, about 2:30, you know, how do they get the times wrong and everything? I mean, people early on, when they're trying to cope with so much, they're trying to process, murder and learn about everything. You're not always going to say things right. The Snapchat was sent out at 2:07. Now, people like I Have the Ducky, and then all the people that people like him have influenced, and channels such as TCD and things that, you know, that go out and sermonize with these ideas to people, and people take it on. They become these repeaters, and they're true believers. They believe that what happened with the Snapchat picture was that Snapchat picture was created out of another photo of Abby holding her baseball mitt and out the back of a hotel where her grandfather was before she went and had a little bit of practice at Riley. And they say that her photo was taken then. And I mean, the thing is, right, they don't really nail down all the timing of everything. If Libby was killed first and then Abby had to be, and you know, it's too hard to explain it all. I just get it all in my head, and it would just take an hour to unpick it for you. So I don't want to do that. But anyway, you know, just think about it, right? Think about all the things that they are professing, and then put it together with the other things that they're saying. They're saying this is clearly a Valentine's Day sacrificial blood ritual murder. But they also say that Libby wasn't killed on February the 14th, and that they needed to set Abby and Libby at the bridge. So how they did that was by creating a false narrative, a false timeline, by pretending that Libby was alive to take a photo of Abby on the bridge on February the 13th. And then that maybe Abby was held somewhere, you know, Abby was held all this time. And when she was killed, I'm not sure, are they saying she was killed on February the 14th? Or is it just that they say that the ritual in place there, and the ritual was held with dead bodies on the 14th? But wouldn't it all be about blood sacrifice being made on the 14th? But do you know, it doesn't sort of... Gentle Midget, just hang 10, because we're just about to talk about other double homicides of people committed by one person, because it happens. So the Snapchat, so what happened? So they're saying, you know, so this was created out of this other photo and then placed, you know, her image was placed onto the bridge to make it look like she's walking the bridge, and like if it was taken on Libby's phone, it's Libby alive. And remember, Vala's blot is the 14th. Apparently she died on the 11th or 12th, though. That doesn't make it a Vala's blot sacrifice, does it? But logic isn't. This is what I was saying about, you know, the paranoid schizophrenia or the psychotic mindset, you know, situation, and how you're sort of nearly there, but it's not right. It's sort of, but you can really think that it's right and you're onto it. And then that was sent out as Snapchat on 2007. So they're saying it wasn't just a photo taken in Snapchat. You click and it just goes, okay? And again, Greeno in, some of his videos shows he's got in his recreation, and he has his actresses one on the bridge, one taking the Snapchat. They do a bit of a practice first. They do an experiment. They check. How does this go out? What happens? Yes, it's sent immediately. And what you don't realize about Snapchat, though, if you are using a background, if you're uploading a picture onto Snapchat that's already been taken, your image is there, and you have to angle the phone to get your face out of it, or the background if you've got it turned the other way. So you could take a photo of yourself if they were really trying to upload a picture that was just created using Libby's device so that it could be used as a timeline alibi or whatever. It wouldn't look like that. You wouldn't have that angle of that bridge, because you'd then have to angle your phone to get your face out of it, whomever's taking the photo. And then the picture, it's going to look warped. I did some research into that. I don't think they've really experimented. Somebody go to the bridge and upload a photo just looking at the bridge like that and see what happens. Like, not just take a photo to upload, but do what Eye of the Ducky says happened, and it's actually not possible. And there are people that have, I know what's difficult is, okay, you lose metadata because all we've got to go on are people that thought to screenshot that image because they thought it was cool. They thought it was cool because their friend is walking across the Monon High Bridge. No, I'm not British, Azariah. I am a New Zealander. So that's the Snapchat. And what the hell has it all got to do with the Valor's Blot if the blood sacrifice didn't actually happen on the 14th? They say the staging. I don't even know if I could do a British accent. It's just a white trash Kiwi accent. No, so I'm just kidding. It's just a very just regular accent. It's actually not a very strong British Kiwi accent anymore. When I go back home or when I talk to people on the phone, it gets stronger. The New Zealand accent is it's actually really cute, but this has been flattened out over time just as a necessity from living in a different country than New Zealand. So, that's what we've got to think about. Okay, so the defense are saying, you think it sounds pretty? Oh, thanks. Keep trying. I've always hated the sound of my voice. You sound like, Noel Gallagher, Brian. Is that from Manchester? I can't remember where he's from. Wonder Woman. Right. Sorry, I haven't really been reading. I've just been glancing up and seeing, because I just use my phone, but I take it you're all just chatting nicely amongst yourself. It's so nice to have some mods in as well. What do you guys think about? Because I don't know what time. Holy moly, what time? It's 10. I did start a lot later than I was aiming, maybe at 8:40 then. I was trying to start at 6 a.m. in the morning, or maybe 7 in the morning my time, just to see if it made a difference. But yeah, just outside Manchester. Cool. Oh, sorry. How many times did he go fish washing before this day? So 7 p.m. for you, Kat. Oh, that sounds like it might be a good time, unless you've got grandkiddies with you or something and you're trying to get dinners and baths and bed and things like that. Yeah. Oh God, now where am I? There's so much. Okay, so the defense want us to think Odinist, which means white supremacist. We've got white people being accused of being white supremacists in jail that just sort of appear wearing badges in March and stop wearing them in September because they're told to by the prison. They actually have a right under religious liberty to express their beliefs. It's not true that they're not allowed to wear anything outside of their uniform, although there have been terrible stories about people getting fired for wearing a cross that was visible. I mean, I say just wear a longer chain then, but anyway, so the fence says it's white supremacist ritual killing. There are YouTubers going, yeah, that's what it is, but their arguments don't make sense, and they're also so complicated. It involves the whole town, and then you would think, well, you know, you would be looking for a patsy. So they've got Richard Allen, and then why then would they out themselves again by pressuring Richard Allen wearing these badges, bringing the attention to the defense when they maybe were going to get away with it? Was there something in the defense, you know? And it doesn't make sense what they're saying about Valentine's Day, because they also say that the girls weren't murdered on that day, but that they were taken back at 2:00. They will, it's propaganda about calls versus, GPS versus pings versus this versus that. It is a mystery about the clothes. I couldn't for the life of me find a copy of a video that Kelsey German, Liberty German's older sister, made in her grandmother's home with Becky there. She's wearing a grey sweatshirt. People say that I can't fit the sweatshirt and it wouldn't have fitted Abby and everything. It's so weird. I wish I could remember what she was saying. Was she saying this is the sweatshirt, or I've got my own sweatshirt, or Abby would fit mine? It was so odd. Kelsey German has removed all of her videos except for some about her dog on her Kelsey German YouTube page. Okay, they're all taken down. You can't go back and review anything, but that girl is her own worst enemy. She is, I'm just sitting here not talking very well, but, she is a terrible communicator. I believe that would be partly the reason why she never got any advocacy jobs in these organizations that she really wanted to work for and with. She wanted to go out and be an advocate. The girl cannot communicate. She's confusing. She's mind warping. She's difficult to listen to. She's queer, weird. She's awkward, right? She was a very young girl when her sister died, even though she'd had a lot of pressure in her life because of her parents. She was still, was she 15? No, sorry, Libby was 14, or just turned 14 maybe, and maybe Kelsey was 16, and so that's quite young. We aren't developed until 25 apparently, right? No, that's right, I didn't think they lived very close, but I know that sometimes you are there or that, yeah. Brian, it's 1:00 in the PM, and you're still... Brian, you've got to not buy things that you need to iron. I know things like, if you're wearing business shirts, or if you've got a look that likes to be crisp, you have to. But if you don't want to iron, you have to just get different clothes. We use a dry cleaner. Right. Anyway, so let's just move on, because part of this I wanted to mention some terrible crimes where people were killed by one person. There were two victims killed at the same time in the same incidents. I haven't got very many here, but you'll actually find quite a few. But I just thought I'd mention a few. We often hear of Zion in relation to Delphi and Evansdale. Okay, these areas that are quite close, I think around Illinois and so Delphi, of course, is Abby and Libby, 2017. Evansdale occurred several years beforehand with some younger girls, and they were Lyric and Elizabeth. Don't quote me, but I think it was around 2012. And please go to a channel like Ruckus Rocks, whatever you think of Ruckus Rocks. He is an ex-law enforcement person, and he's been working with parents, particularly one, and I can't remember if he's Elizabeth's or Lyric's. I'm sorry, I think maybe Elizabeth Collins' father. I'm not sure, I'm sorry. Working there, he's trying to solve their double homicide. So in Evansdale, they were found 6 months after they went missing. They were on a bike ride, cycling around town, and they disappeared. 6 months later, they were found laid out in the wilderness, kind of in an area that is used by hunters. I think hunters stumbled across them. Their bodies were laid out separate, but in a line. I don't know if it was heads facing heads or what, but their bodies were just out in the open, skeletonized, of course, skeletal, of course. And I don't think much could be gotten by any forensic examination of their remains. Their bicycles were found, so just off the main road behind a fence and by this waterway, like this little dam that probably had frogs and things in it. I don't know. What is an iron? Yeah. I did buy a steamer recently, but I've never used it. It depends on your body type, so not to digress too much, but if you are a dramatic figure, so if you look, no matter how tall you are, if you look sort of long and tall and sharp, crisp things really do look good on you, fitted close to the body, long lengths, and yes, looking nice and starched, angles and things, but work with your body type, so your bones are sharp. If you're more like me, it's better to have softer things that drape a little bit more and can be a bit looser, and it's quite lucky because you don't when you don't look quite right in stiff clothes, even if you're wearing formal wear, it needs to be different. It's my study of body type that allows me to see who might look like bridge guy and who doesn't, by the way. So Lyric and Elizabeth. So I mention this because it's two girls. I'm not of knowledge. I don't know if they were killed by one perpetrator, but they were taken broad daylight. What people need to be aware of with their children, and this isn't policing parenting. You do what you do. We often get a lot of furor around comments like, I'd never let my kid, why do they let them go to the bridge on their own? Why weren't they with them? Come on, just stop that. That does nothing. That helps nobody, okay? Yes, we might feel that. You might feel like that, but please, when you say it, you've got to realize that it comes across as virtue signaling and as judgment and just unrealistic expectations on people you don't know, and you're judging people of a different lifestyle, a different culture, a different everything, right? This is our bias comes in and tells us what to think about something, the possibilities of something, simply because of we look at everything from our own experience and feelings and beliefs and judgment, okay? But broad daylight, the bike's left behind. But what you do need to realize is a lot of predators will notice that there are often children who are just on their own in a neighborhood. They don't seem to have anyone looking out for them, and then they will go back and they'll make sure this keeps happening, and then they take them. And they do hunt like that, and people just disappear. And you will find interviews with convicted predators, murderers, who say that that is how they often got their victims. Remember Brian Chadwell, who kidnapped into his home, into his basement, a 9-year-old girl. She was subjected to all sorts of assault. She was chained up in his basement, and even her dog, even his pibble, one of his pibbles, attacked her. And who knows though, he could have known that if he saw her in the neighborhood, he wouldn't see an adult. And she was only a few doors away from her own home. And that's how they operate. So I'm sorry I'm bringing that up into my list of 2 people, 1 killer, but I wanted to just say these things do happen in broad daylight, and they do happen to people that are together. It doesn't have to be that people are opportunistic only when they see one person. Those girls, I think they're only 11 and 13 or 12 and 11 or something like that, 10 and 11. They were younger. 2 that were a bit older, and definitely 1 victim. Where are we? Sorry. So I was talking about Zion. I'm so sorry. And I turned into Lyric and Elizabeth. In Zion, so we've got Zion, Evansdale, DELPHI. For a long time, people were saying these are all the same person, except Zion, the correct kill has been found. For a long time, Jerry Hobbs, not to be mistaken for Terry Hobbs in the West Memphis 3 case, he was held for 5 years fighting for his innocence. He was the father of Laura, 8-year-old Laura. So 8-year-old Laura, 9-year-old Crystal, they were on their bikes. That's why I put Elizabeth and a Lyric here too. It doesn't matter if there's bicycles, if you think they could have cycled away. There is precedence that one person killed in the same situation. So these girls, 8 and 9, so only a smidge younger than Lyric and Elizabeth. They were taken from their bikes, they were sexually assaulted, and they were fatally stabbed in the neck and face. And for a long time, this father was, because he's an ex-felon. He was blamed. And then what happened? Well, DNA found George Avila Torres. And at the time, guess how old he was? He was 16 years old when he committed this double murder and got away with it for a very long time. But he just couldn't help himself. He committed other rapes and assaults. He went into a military branch, can't remember what it was, and he assaulted a 19-year-old, this other officer, killed her. And yeah, so it was through DNA that he was discovered to have killed Laura and Crystal, 2 girls, even on bicycles, by one person, and just a boy at that. He had a vague connection to one of them. I think maybe Crystal, he had dated or was friends with a sister, or knew someone that dated Crystal. There was a little bit of a connection there. I can't remember how. So he was aware of them. So he also would have been aware of their habits and the fact that, yeah, they did go out hanging out together. And he's had this fantasy. It's a violent sexual fantasy, which is probably what is the situation with Libby and Abby. Libby and Abby look like a sexually motivated crime. They look like a violent fantasy killing. That's what it looks like, and it looks staged. Why Odinists would leave it looking like a ritual, leave that intact? I mean, what sort of message are they saying? Why would they want to get caught for a crime? were they really that confident, so to speak, that, you know, they can let everybody know and nothing will be done? How did they not know that maybe instead of instilling fear in the people that they're supposed to be getting revenge or sending a message to, how did they know that these people wouldn't go, instead of, oh yes, Massa, whatever you say, Massa, I'm going to keep quiet. We're never going to bring any justice to you at all. Or how did they know that they won't go, yeah, I know you did it, motherfuckers. Now, yeah. Why wouldn't they just get a gun and go and just do a drive-by and shoot the bastards? How could they, you know, they got that much power when people that are saying that this is kind of something that happened, maybe they contradict themselves. They make no sense. They're saying that the Paddies have so much power. What is it? What is it? They can't make up their minds. Nothing is cohesive because they're throwing everything at it. Mike Paddy is really, you know, he's very powerful in DELPHI. He's dictating what happens. The girls were killed in revenge or to, you know, to shush up by white supremacists who let everybody know. They let everybody know because why? But even the people that are committing corrupt crimes in DELPHI, this previously unnamed Doolin, when he's been running amok lawlessly, it isn't against people of colour, it's against white ex-veterans. Jesse Snyder. I mean, anyway, what is going on here? Two others, okay, so Skylar and Taylor, 11-year-old Skylar, 13-year-old Taylor, just walking around their country town. I think they were going down the road. I think they were the ones, one of them was having a sleepover at the other's house. They were going to sleep over that night, and it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. 2:30 in the afternoon. Broad daylight. They just wanted to go for a walk. I think they wanted to walk down to someone else's property, or they were just entertaining themselves. People like to go for walks. Young people love going for walks. Don't you wish your life, you know, could be rambling in the countryside and just dreaming and exploring and discovering things again like you did when you were a kid? So they were walking. They were killed from a car. They were just gunned down, multiple gunshots to each of them. And the guy that did it, you know, he was just psychopath, right? He was trying to say they were demons and everything, but he's just seen them on the road and decided to shoot them. 2 girls, 1 killer. In Newport, Oregon, this is going back 1995, 16-year-old Cara, and I think she was 16 as well, a girl called Jennifer. Don't know where they were walking to, but it was night. Maybe they were trying to get home or go to the other girl's house. I can't remember. 16-year-olds can be very willful, can't they, and everything. So they were walking at 1 a.m. at night, and they were found 2.5 weeks later in woods, piled on top of each other and strangled. And sorry, look, again, you know, there's not a conviction, but there's a well-known person of interest called Bobby Jack Fowler. And the reason why they think it's him is because he's also thought to have committed these other really violent crimes that are very similar, leaving people in the woods. But, you know, 2 victims are common. There was also something I saw, I've seen it before, but that chapter, Mike of that chapter did a really good, everything he does is good, video about a guy that's a serial killer from all over, right? But he ended up in this little town where he's working in, I think, the costume department or the scenery department of a theatre. And 3 people went missing at once from that theatre, but he's also linked to so many other murders. They all happened around him, and he hasn't been convicted. I should have found more where there are convictions, but I just wanted to say, okay, you've got the bicycles who was found for the bicycle murder? Just one person, and it was a 16-year-old. So, you know, it's possible that Lyric and Elizabeth, it's just one person. There's an FBI agent that was saying at the time that she thought Lyric and Elizabeth may have actually been held somewhere for up to a week. Isn't that repulsive? The other thing I wanted to just discuss was the fact that we all want victims' families to all be very likable. We want them to all be very relatable, and we want them to say all the right things at the right time. We want them to act in a way that we just go with their flow and that we judge is correct. You know, and when victims' families are poor communicators, or when they're felons, and, you know, and sometimes unlikable, and sometimes seem to, you know, we know that they're just believing their own narrative. It's very painful for people to face things, right? To face, you know, they probably do want to rewrite their relationships as not being so painful because that person is gone. They can never make amends. They must think of all the things that went into creating dysfunction and pain and loss, but they can't fix it. They're never going to have that person turn into an adult that they can then sort of discuss. Let's see, does that make it any black and white? Yeah, so, you know, we've got to think about our personal bias, think about our belief systems, you know, what wild allegations are based on, you know, they are on fact, so we can speculate without being gross, but what is actually based on uneducated belief? There's so much that, there's so much that you see written in comment sections and everything, don't you, that it's just so, you know, people are idiots, not to be mean, but they're idiots, and they spew the grossest things out. They have no idea. It's always this. 100% of the time, they throw out facts and figures that they actually don't understand, that are incorrect. Can one of you just put a little symbol in the chat or something? Maybe no one's just saying anything. I just want to make sure this is actually still rolling. Just, I don't know, because my Wi-Fi is really bad. You know, we need to think about things like, you know, the defense are coming up with this Odinism angle, and they're very convinced about it. And sure, it can look like ritual. Okay, so, oh, thanks, Jane. Thanks, Brian. Can look like ritual, but it could definitely be staged and moved and staged. I mean, there's so many weird things with this crime scene, right? You know, there is the issue of the clothing. I wish I could find Kelsey German's video where she's wearing a grey zip-up, and I can't remember what she was saying about this grey zip-up. But that's very weird because Abby had a grey zip-up because she's photographed in it, but then she borrowed one. But why is Kelsey wearing one? What was her point again? I can't remember. Video's gone. Someone probably clipped it. Maybe one of her Kelsey is guilty people clipped it. Oh, thanks, Perry. Thanks, Mark. Sorry, it's not that you have to sit there and chat amongst yourselves or to me, but I just wasn't sure because sometimes it jams. But, you know, the items in the creek, I don't know if I believe the picture of the items in the creek, but Abby was on top of Libby's shoe and Libby's phone. So the other shoe of Libby's was elsewhere, which may be in the creek. That makes me think that picture of the clothing in the creek caught up on the reeds wasn't real, because the shoe apparently was somewhere else. And Kelsey German saw it and said, yeah, maybe that's it. And then they found the girls or something. We've got Abby wearing someone else's clothes. We had Libby apparently wearing grey trackies with black lettering and a tie-dye t-shirt and a black sweatshirt. But then Abby is in jeans that are too big for her. But then later Becky has said, oh, I couldn't remember because at one point she was in her trackies. Well, maybe Libby just slept in her tracksuit but changed into jeans before she went because she wanted to dress like Abby maybe, who was wearing jeans. But, you know, it is very strange. Maybe they couldn't be seen at night simply because of these branches. Very sensationalized. I mean, it's the same sensational enough as it is, right? I'm annoying myself now with my filter. Yeah, so it's weird. But, you know, look at the logistics. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to mention was, how do I get rid of that? Another thing I wanted to mention too was yonks ago, I don't remember how many years ago, but very early days, and I can't remember if it was on the WKAT channel that Greeno and Michael Cat did together, or if it was on Cat's channel, or if it was on a Greeno channel. But back when they were talking to who got dubbed Flannel Shirt Guy, FSG, purely because they talked to him, David McCain, when he was wearing a black and white checked shirt. It doesn't mean he was wearing a black and white checked shirt on the trail, but that's how we picture it, right? But Flannel Shirt Guy, they talked with him. They found out later that it was David McCain. And at the time, they were also talking about, you know, someone on the private drive who was maybe wearing black and who maybe looked quite young and who had a woolly cap on, and was there that morning of February the 13th and was seen by one of the people who owns property going up along that private drive, and they turned into their driveway but then reversed back to go and try and get a good look, but he was gone. But they saw this person they didn't know, and you know, this is a private drive. You should be knowing who's on your private property, but of course there are people that go in and visit and things like that. But so they sort of caught a glimpse, okay? But that's in the morning. That's a long time to hang around and wait for, you know, so this big coordinated effort, right? We've got to match up with who we know we're on the tracks, on the trails, from all the witness statements that have been put together. And you could even say Harvey Carroll Jr., you know, who didn't identify Ellen on the trails. I think he says he did, though, because you'd have to, right? Because he identified the 70 people there. But and when we say trails too, remember that this is a huge system, and it goes off through town and on the other side of town, up along the Wabash River and the Erie Canal and all of that. It's a big system. There's walking trails that sprout off everywhere. Monon is just on one little end off the edge of the east-south side of town. But it's a huge trail system. So it's identifying who was at this part, who went further than Freedom Bridge and kept going around to get to the Monon High Bridge Trail. And, you know, if there's these other people that were there, when did they cross the bridge? Did they come down from the cemetery? Was it Ron Logan, so that he was just on his own land, you know, meeting the girls down the other end of the creek? But how does this all fit in with taking them away, with the Odinists taking them away? It's so queer because these groups that have been blaming the family, and then just if you've watched their content long enough, you realize that they have just tied themselves up in knots. Of course, a lot of things, what happens is there's truth, there's often, if lots of things have a basis in truth, corruption, the bullshit and jelly beans that go on with the politics and stuff, but just make it make sense. They keep contradicting themselves. They can't, if they're saying Ellen is innocent, which she may well be, they've got to decide who done it. And they're saying that, some of them are saying that it's all this misdirection, one thing after the other. Oh, it's the Odinists. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. And they're saying it's all coming, from Becky Patty and Mike Patty and that sort of thing. But it doesn't explain everything. It's unfortunate that Anna Williams probably communicated only by text with Abby Williams the morning of the February 13th, late morning. Sometimes you hear that I spoke to Abby on the morning of. No mention of the bridge. Well, they were thinking of going to the bridge. Abby's not going to tell her mum to go. She wants to go to the bridge because Anna wouldn't have let her. But she has to accept that God, it must eat away at you. Why did you let my fucking daughter go to the bridge? But, her philosophy is that if it's all right for her daughter to stay with a family, then by proxy of that, then she has to accept the decisions they make for what the girls can do too, right? But then you hear that it was just a text, right? But if Abby was thinking about going to the bridge, she certainly didn't mention it, and apparently it was more of a spur of the moment, and hear it closer to when they went. Yeah, see, we don't know that, do we, Perry? She's probably, of course, she'd be saying, no, it's not. But someone had said, do you think, something about the bridge? Yes, Ellen would have been very, very familiar with the trails. We know that Kathy and Rick Allen love the great outdoors. A lot of their holidays that they would post, they go to different places where they walk trails and they climb mountains, and there's that footage of them in a gondola going down a mountainside, probably after they've walked up, I don't know. I think they go to Gettysburg, and people take that voice sound bite of Ellen and place it next to the bridge guys. It does sound like it could be him, but forensically, neither section of speech from Bridge Guy and from Rick Allen in the gondola, it's not long enough to analyze. There's just not enough there. But it does could be him, but it sounds like it could be a lot of people. And people make a lot of Mike Patty's guys. That he does sound like he could say guys, but half of Indiana's male population probably sound like that when they say it. But yeah, Richard Allen lived in Delphi. I think he probably was in his street, Whiteman Drive or White Horse Crescent or whatever it is, over on, the Deer Creek Township side, southwest side of Delphi. Since 2006, Kathy Allen's had to sell their house. And they are outdoorsy, and I would guarantee you that quite a lot of their coupledom together, they did everything together, playing pool, going to tournaments, going on their holidays, trekking together. She was always there, it seems, right? She did, but I'd guarantee you they walked those towpaths very regularly, and I guarantee you Richard Allen went to that bridge. And if he is the killer, he could walk up through Bridge Creek. He could have. I mean, he could have walked from the Farm Bureau building, just moved his car a few hundred meters or a kilometer or whatever, and walked up Bridge Creek, coming in from the south. Coming in from, now I'm confused. Coming in from, flipped it around, southwest. Yeah, he could have. And then he could have walked back that way. But, you know, we've got the issue of the CPS building being on the diagonal opposite to where his town was, with, say, the little bridge kind of in the middle here. And, you know, ostensibly, or accused of being seen near the Freedom Bridge section and walking towards the trails where the timeline, if that's him, proves that he was going toward the bridge and not away, where he was then seen by, is it Betty or Betsy? 15 minutes later. But if when she's arriving, if she's seen a group of 4 girls on the bridge, did she spend a lot of time in her car before walking off? No, she's walked up and she's seen him coming back. Because I'd wondered, did she see 3 girls and Richard Allen on the bridge? Is that the 4 that she saw on the bridge, crossing under Hoosier Heartland Highway, under the Freedom Bridge? She saw 4 figures. She subsequently goes and parks opposite Mears, walks up, and as she's coming back, no, but that's funny, no, because she saw the girls coming back and Ellen was already up there. I need to get it straight. Sorry, this is waffly. What are you guys saying? Yeah, you could practically walk the whole way without leaving the woods. But again, you know, he's still walking out the backs of homes and things. You could probably do that quite stealthily. But, you know, it's this whole, people want to support their theories, and they might be right, okay, you know, but they want to support their theories by saying, not in broad daylight, not 2 girls at a time, not by one person. And it's history just proves that they are wrong. Yeah, he knew the area very well. I mean, he'd lived in DELPHI for 11 years. He was outdoorsy. He would have walked that bridge hundreds of times, possibly. We don't know. In that 11 years, he could have gone out there all the time. We know for a fact that his family is aware of Monon High Bridge. Some Delphinites are not aware of the Monon High Bridge. I mean, they just do different things with life, right? But his family was, because his daughter Brittany was photographed on that bridge, and then the published image eventually went up online in 2018. But I think it was taken before the girls were murdered. People say all sorts of things like, oh, they were friends, they went to school with. She's so much older than Abby and Libby, okay? She's a completely different generation. She's nothing to do with them. But the family did know about the bridge. She's photographed there in a graduation photo, which is traditional for high school graduates of DELPHI to go out to the bridge and have their photo there. I think it might be a black and white image, and she's sitting on the bridge with her legs up, you know, the bridge in the background looking toward the 501 trail. So they were aware of it. And, you know, there's also the picture of her wearing a tie-dye Abby and Libby fundraiser t-shirt. Yeah. People are making a lot out of the son-in-law, the person that Brittany married soon after the murders. People are trying to say he's a co-conspirator, or that he's a witness. He might well be a witness. But what we don't know from the defense, they're bringing in all this accusation about, I'll try not to be too much longer, guys, bringing in a lot of accusation about some random things, but, you know, there's enough that you can interpret or whatever that, you know, to bring in reasonable doubt for a lot of people, okay? So that's their job as defense, to introduce reasonable doubt. But what have they brought in that's actually exculpatory to do with Richard Allen? So they're trying to change the timeline. They know they've got a timeline issue of him moving towards the bridge and not going away, if that's him in these sightings and everything. It may not be. So, you know, we need to know what more people have on him, right? Because quite often we think we know so much before a case goes to trial, and then you are blown away with the evidence. Okay, we've seen that time and time again. But what exculpatory evidence has defense brought? It's not like they've gotten hold of all the details, they've understood the case. You know, wouldn't you first look at, okay, let's look at our person and let's see, was this possible for him to do? Just cut out for a bit there. BMW eyes, Mark is onto it. Whatever happened? It's so nice when I don't have to read these things that could be quite disturbing. Thanks. So, for example, you'd think the simplest thing would be just to show this is bullshit. Because, you know, he was actually there from 12 to 1:30, and after that, he watched such and such game. He actually placed a bet online for a team to win, and we can show you that that was at 12:56, and that, you know, or 1:56. Kathy called him on their home line, if they had one, you know. Kathy called him, and his GPS shows that he took a phone call at yes, please, yes, you can, yes, we can. So, did he get onto his home computer and pay his phone bill, or pay the gas bill, or email someone, or what, you know? Maybe he was home all afternoon, not doing anything, like he could have just been working outside, something like that, or in the shed. But if he was working outside, you know, did neighbors see him? The trouble is, we've got 5 years later now, and it's going to be, you can't just sort of, you know, witnesses, we can't remember. Was it that day? Was it this day? Did they look like this? Did they look like that? What order did things happen in? But, you know, they haven't introduced any exculpatory evidence. Now, just because there might not be any doesn't mean that there wasn't something. But if Alan came forward to the conservation officer of the time, he also would have in his memory, he would know, but I did this, this, and this. Was he able to provide anything about the rest of his afternoon in that interview, or is it in his mind? Has he been able to bring up anything for his defense to say, no, but I also remember, because when I spoke to them on the 14th about that day, of course it was on my mind what I did that day, and I did this, this, and this. There's nothing that he's been able to come up with that's exculpatory that the defense would have mentioned. So is it just unfortunate circumstantially for Richard Allen that he might have just been in this blackout zone and just doing other things with his afternoon? But don't you find it's just all so weird what we have to you know, recall, right? Surely there are records of, I don't know how far they go back, but his phone automatically connecting to Wi-Fi as he drives into his street. Things like that. What time did that happen, right? So it becomes apparent, you know, it became apparent to us, didn't it? Why in the PCA they put officer. Rick Allen spoke to an officer early on. It just said, it didn't even give us the date. It said in the PCA, don't quote me, but, you know, Richard Allen spoke to an officer in 2017. It's describing, you know, his visit to the bridge. That he walked along the trails. At one time he was on a bench. He saw a group of 3 girls before that. He was on the bridge. He was watching his stock ticker, and he was looking at some fish. He never saw Abby and Libby, but he saw the people that show the timeline of him moving towards the exact moment that he would have crossed their paths, but he never saw them. But he came straight forward. Officer. Well, the reason why we got only an officer, and there seems to be a lot of this, doesn't it? Just sort of this brushing over, officer, professor, you know, it doesn't look good, okay? It does not look good for the prosecution to do this. And, you know, is this a choice by prosecution because they are just as terrible as the investigators, or is it because the prosecutor are trying to deal with the shit that they've been handed from the investigators? But it was probably a good choice, although all it did was delay the inevitable that we would find out that it was the now fire chief of Carroll County, or of DELPHI. DELPHI or Carroll County? Gee, how the crappy have risen. Dan Doolin, D-U-L-I-N, Dan Doolin was apparently this officer who took a statement from Richard Allen in the course of the investigation very early on. For a long time before we knew it was Dan Doolin, of course, we're going crazy with speculation. Who was this officer? A conservation officer? Was it a firefighter? Was it, you know, there was the discussions about, there was the accusations that it was an FBI, like some intern, someone that was just vaguely connected to them that wasn't fully part of the investigation. That's who done it. That's who did this wrong. But no, it was Dan Doolin. Now, Dan Doolin, I can't remember whose channel I originally saw this on, and again, years ago, this expose. It is, if, you know, you will cry, you will lose it. You will be so angry. What happened to this person called Jesse Snyder? And Dan Doolin led the assault and the ruination of this person's life. Because Jesse Snyder, he's a veteran. He's a military veteran with PTSD, and he's trying to rebuild a life. He bought a home that had a shed, a little bit of land maybe in Carroll County, and he's just trying to move forward after war and after seeing combat, I think. And so he's shell-shocked, and, you know, he's suffering, and he's hanging out with his mates in his barn. They're playing paintball, and how they start each round is they're setting off firecrackers, right? I mean, they're just guys being guys, having fun, and, you know, pretty full-on fun. Men love that physical thing and the fear and the bit of pain and everything. I don't know. It's just such a male thing to do, okay? So normal. I think they're just guys in their 20s and 30s or something. I'm not sure how young Jesse was. He wasn't old at all, just this young white guy. Okay, this isn't racist. This is just high cat. This is just arrogance and misuse of power and unlawfulness within law enforcement, okay? And so, you know, I think neighbors might have said, I think I can hear gunshot. And they've gone out there, and of course you would be a bit frightened going into a situation where you think people are shooting guns. What are they doing? Okay? But this young Dan Doolin, just this cocky guy, got something to prove and maybe fearful of what might happen and not really well trained or something, and who knows who's influencing this person. His son now wants to join, you know, into the law enforcement world. Colin, you know, great, don't walk in daddy's footsteps. But I think at the time, you know, he probably might not have been too experienced. Looks reasonably young in footage of DELPHI. But anyway, he goes there and he starts this whole thing off. They, you know, they get these guys down at gunpoint. They can't just talk and rationalize and discuss and find out what was going on. They get all these, Jesse and his friends, down on the ground. I think they're there for something like a whole day, and they're waiting for backup. They brutalize them. They just act so unlawfully. And anyway, Jesse wanted, I don't know what happened, but Jesse was bringing a lawsuit, right? And Carroll County doesn't want to be going around giving out money, do they? They'll spend it subduing 911, you know, keeping 911 calls out of our ears so that we can't hear what happened in the 911 call for floor of fire. 35 grand or something. They justified that, and the pompous wanker that's saying, you know, they're just making the decisions for the people. We can decide that they don't need to hear it. It would just be not, it's too distressing. They don't need to hear that. That's up to us to decide. And it's not. And they spend a lot of money on it, right? All the money that is, what's the word? I don't even know. I can't remember. But I do know, you know, when you're stealing. Sorry, anyway, I'm losing it. But that's Doolin, right? Troublemaker. Just not a cool head. Not a very good police officer. Not very professional, but utterly protected. And then I don't know, was he, you know, so he's still in law enforcement after this debacle. Jesse Snyder was going to get a lot of money from him because Jesse Snyder's life was ruined. I think he was held unlawfully for something, I don't know what, and he lost his house. He couldn't work, he lost his house, his property, his life was ruined, and then he was found dead, you know, of a suicide, okay? And it's not uncommon in Carroll County or in Indiana, right? People are going to be suing the county to get justice against brutality and unlawfulness and misuse of power, and they have things happen to them. Problem solved. So why do you think that Richard Allen would be safe in Carroll County? I'm working soon. Yeah, I'll be working soon, Kit. Safe in Carroll County jail. He's not. He's not. So, you know, so they've tried to suppress who it was for as long as possible. Wise move. But is he known for white supremacist acts? Well, maybe other ones, right? But not the big shit that he was doing. But is he related to something that maybe happened in Flora Fire? I don't know. Then they were saying that, well, how do you lose a bit of paper? Well, apparently it was put into the Orion system that law enforcement, used to manage information. But we would need someone that can talk to us about Orion and say, okay, when you're entering data, is there a way that you can misfile electronically so that this person isn't looked at? But even so, Doolin hasn't come up with, so, this is why we need a trial. We need to see this proof, because we need to see the Orion system. We need to see the data on when it was entered into the system. No, I haven't covered Jesse Snyder, but you'll find all about him. It's devastating. It's heartbreaking. It's so wrong. You will feel so angry. You will feel like, how are these people still working? They can just ruin lives and just get on with their own, earn money, get perks, have power, and even more power, elevated into more. What the fuck is wrong? And and why is it up to YouTubers on the other side of the world, or even in Indiana, to talk up this? What is happening? Why are people standing for this? Is it because, unless you're on YouTube watching true crime channels and watching certain documentaries or certain news channels, why is it that you're not standing up for this and saying this is wrong? Why is Doolin still a law enforcement officer of sorts? The chief of the firefighting department. How does that happen when he's a grossly, when at the best, this misconduct is, So we need to see these proofs. We need to know, okay, show us this Orion system. Show us what you found. What happened? Well, what will actually happen if we can get a trial is we will see this forensic evidence. They will painstakingly go through it and prove when something was put in, how it was labeled, how it might have been mismanaged. So maybe Ellen's details could have been, I don't know enough about this data system, how you access it, and then what it looks like, what this program looks like, how you enter, how you file in it, how you search in it. Okay, it doesn't seem reasonable, but there might be something that meant that he got filed in another place, like someone that's not relevant but was maybe spoken to, but it's not relevant, or is not a witness, or whatever it is, right? But it is gross, and that is something that we would see in court. Before we can really speak on it, we need to understand it. I mean, it just seems mind-boggling though, right? We were imagining that people are writing things down in a little notebook, and the notebook never made it. But we've got the problem of, there is Dan Doolin right there in the war room, so to speak, with Kim Riley, with these people, with the FBI, just sitting there like what? Either an absolute arsehole deciding not to say something for a reason, because maybe he's been told by a Liggett or a Holman. We just got to keep this to ourselves because we might use this later. Aren't they afraid of being sprung? Imagine the power that they feel they would have to feel to contrive this, to use this, over having the scrutiny from agencies like the FBI, Indiana State Police, Homeland Security, maybe, who knows, to feel like they can really wangle this. Okay, so just keep that under wraps. I mean, it's quite likely that Doolin is just a fucking idiot. He is just that useless. He's that macho. He's that biased. He's that he looked at little Richard Allen, little 5-foot Richard Allen, and he just made a decision that it wasn't him. Why you wouldn't speak up and say, have you covered this person? Have you spoken to him? What should have happened is, okay, The details are there. It goes into Orion. This is a person who was at the bridge. He's male. He was alone. He was there at about the right time. We need to treat this person as a person of interest. What do? We need to have access to clothing that he was wearing. We need to take a really complete statement. He needs to describe to us exactly what he did before and after and during the time that the girls were out on the trails and missing until they were found. And that didn't happen, and you have to ask why. And if they had done that, Alan would have been arrested. If he was guilty, he would have been arrested 2 weeks after the crime, and that would have been that. Instead, they are running around like sausages, and they are, following all these red herrings. They knew about Anthony's shots very quickly. And that account, maybe that was a connection to bring people in. A lot of people think so, that it lured Abby and Libby there. How do the people talking about Odinism or talking about the family, they don't tie it up very well. What am I saying? I just get too angry to be patient to do another 3 hours going through the minutiae and showing all the the facets of everything. But Anthony's shots, I don't believe that account lured the girls. If anyone, maybe it was actually Abby as well. We don't know. If Abby is actually the target here, was it her that was going to meet someone, this Holder son or someone like that? It was someone of that group. But, we don't know how their alibis were checked, but people say that Brad Holder was working at Carroll County transfer station. You probably met Ron Logan there. Well, no, he worked in Buffalo at actually the Liberty station, is another name again. And that's 30 minutes north from the Monon High Bridge. But interestingly, I guess, Ron Logan going to the Carroll County transfer station was a crow's fart from Richard Allen's home. It was just sort of the next street, kind of. And the timing would suit to have a little conflab before Alan went out to the bridge, right? And actually Alan would have driven straight past the transfer station. Why aren't people talking about, they had a little meaty-weety out there? Apparently there is footage of Alan going to the transfer station, so we can assume that he's seen also throwing things out. And surely at the time they would have investigated a person that he was seen meeting there at the time in 2017. That didn't happen, but it could have been out on that road. What's the county road there? 600? No, that goes out to private drive. I can't remember. 200 or something. Yes, a crow's fart. And this, the true village of the damned, they like to say that the Baptist church looked right over Allen's. No, it was separated by a road and then a highway, and then the Baptist church. It's just sort of looking over Deership. It's in Deer Creek Township, which is the little outlying suburb of Delphi, where Richard Allen lives and where that transfer station is. It's the Deer Creek Township, like a little subdivision sort of thing. It's true. Richard Allen would have been driving past Abby's house probably a lot going into work. He may have seen them. He may have recognized them when he saw them at the trails, if it was him, right? But there's so much people have to explain, and that they're so sure about one thing, but there's always something that doesn't make sense, but they've still tied it in. I'm not describing this all very well. I'm just tired now, and I've been talking for a while, and I just get over it all, right? Because it would be so exhausting to discuss. But, you know, I just wanted to bring up these things and then have, you know, not that you're not thinking about it already, but just to say, well, this is the things that I'm thinking about. So, okay, so if it was Odinists, why this? Why that? If it was the families, and then why this and why that? And then if it's Richard Allen, why? Who's doing this and why? Why are people saying it couldn't be him? Why did Dan Doolin not do anything? And why didn't, you know, I mean, you look at all those people involved, from Kim Riley directly involved in the FBI, and, you know, all of the officers from the sheriff's department and everything, all there together working so hard, you know. FBI saying, you know, there could be 20 people from our FBI offices at any one time working on this. Well, how fucking useless. And right there with it is Dan Doolin, who apparently took the statement from Richard Allen. Why isn't he saying anything? Is it just because he's decided, because he's the man, he's just so good. He just looked at Richard Allen and he's just dismissed him. So has, you know, and is he so hopeless at his job that he's put, you know, it into the Orion system without filing it electronically where it should have gone, where it should have been flagged often to be filed. Yeah. Do you see why I'm so frustrated? You know, and he's there, and we've all seen him on stage, and you know, we know the troublemaker that he is, and clearly the prosecutors know that too, and that's why they didn't name him in the PCA. You know, he's a barrier. He's a barrier to justice. You know, if it's Allen, you know, he's a liability. This person is a liability. And it is so foul that liabilities remain. They just get reassigned, they get promoted, and they're just so ineffectual, useless, and they're so negative, costly, and they're just draining resources and living the life. And what are the citizens of Carroll County doing about that? They should be doing something about that. It's not up for Paul, you know, for any sort of talking head to be the one that is advocating for righteousness and justice in Delphi, Carroll County and Indiana and everywhere else. What the fuck has it really got to do with us? What can we actually do? So what are you doing, Delphi? Now that you know it was Dan Doolin, when's the time come to say, you know, we need something to happen? When's the time come to say whomever is directly responsible? I mean, Tobe Leesenby was, you know, it was Carroll County, no, Sheriff's Office, we're the lead in this. So why isn't his head rolling with this mismanagement? You know, or Kim Riley or Doug Carter. They're still drawing a salary, taking the perks, exercising power, you know? Yeah, so just, you know, I just wanted to talk about some things that we need to be aware of and go, but you're saying this, so if that's true, why are you also saying this? There's so much of that. You know, think about the logistics. Okay, so think about the logistics. It was either, you know, it was a ritual sacrifice, and or this big cover-up by the family with so much planning. What a logistical nightmare. They explained the possibilities away as, oh, no, not everyone know. They had a role, but they didn't all know what each other was doing, just as long as they do their part. But, wow, what planning. And how is this all being communicated? And, you know, gee, how do they all manage to do this, isn't it? God, they're all geniuses, aren't they, to plot like this and to get away with this and, like, have 20 people involved all doing the right thing in advance or when the time comes. I mean, and to think that, you know, they think whatever they do, they can get out of it if any light is brought to them because they're just that powerful. You know, so if it's white supremacy, you've got to explain that. And if you're going to say it's to do with flora fire, well, why Libby? Why Abby? They say that, okay, so they were in the office, Becky Patty's office, looking up files, helping file. Did Libby see something in the flora file? Oh, you know, so much misinformation. No, he had to go back to the site. Derek German had to go back to photograph something because the other photos were lost or they weren't good enough. People say he went back to the Flora house to re-photo that on the day. That's where he was in Flora. No, that makes fucking zero sense. I mean, Derek might have photographed the Flora house for Becky Patty. Gail Rose, the mother of the children that died, she doesn't say that when the house was photographed, Derek German was there with Becky Patty. Becky Patty just walked into her home on behalf of the insurers or something, the owners, Josh Ayres and whatever, to value the house for insurance purposes. But, you know, were her own photos really bad? Did Derek German go back to Flora at some point? Who knows? But people get it all so tangled, and they do it often. And you have to be paying attention, and we need to call them on it and stop the repeating of this bullshit, because the thing going around now is Derek German, he's photographing the Flora house, and it's just an excuse to go there and say, I mean, the house had burned down. It was already burned and gone. That was done. Patty's had nothing to do with valuations or anything of the house after it's burned. This was an incident after Gail moved in, before the house burned down, and it burned down November 2016. It is recent history in terms of the murders in Delphi, February 2017, but that's not where Derek German was. He was in Frankfurt. Frankfurt, which is where Ron Logan went to the tropical fish. And people say you don't spend 2 hours, 3 hours in a tropical fish store. No, yes you do. People do. They're in there for hours. And that's what happens. But again, we don't know. We've got a receipt from 5:37 or something, or 5:27, giving him time to get back just to see Pat Brown at 6 p.m, go to his house to ask if he can look on his land, and Pat goes and parks in the cemetery. Gets blocked in by law enforcement officers, maybe accidentally on purpose, because if you're looking for missing girls and you see a vehicle parked in a cemetery, you might be thinking, could this be someone to do with the girls that have gone missing? Maybe we should just stop them from leaving. I don't know. And park them in. Oops, not enough room. Had to park you in. I mean, and then it's just tough shit, right? What are you going to do as a citizen? So I don't know. I thought maybe that was just part of what law enforcement might do in that situation as part of their training, or, you know, I don't know. Anyway, where the fuck was I? So time wise, right? So then, you know, you've got this, you know, this fake Snapchat. You've got, oh, this person, go and capture someone on the bridge. We'll use that. We'll set him up. I mean, it's all so weird. And sure, setups happen, but this elaborate and relying on so much, and for what reasons? But, you know, if it's linked to white supremacy, so that would mean, oh, they're going to get exposed for killing these girls. You know, it makes these people the victims, the families the victims as well. And how could they act so quickly? They say, but Libby saw something in the drawer. What, that morning? She was looking that morning. Oh, it was another time that she was maybe doing filing. So they say, because Libby was doing filing and she probably saw something about Flora, and I heard she was going to go to the police. So this all happened amongst having pancakes and asking Kelsey to go to the bridge, and someone heard about it and planned this elaborate ruse. They don't hear themselves. They don't hear themselves. I wish I could say this all better. I think you can use your own minds to work through all of this, right? You know, we don't have the autopsy. People think they're not going to find pancake in their stomachs. They think the girls weren't actually spending the night together. You know, so many things. Richard Allen's life is ruined if he's innocent, okay? And that is just an absolute tragedy, and particularly if because he's been set up. Was there a reason to move forward and set someone up when they'd basically gotten away with murder? They didn't need to find someone. They didn't need to try and go through an expensive court case that they cannot afford and bring more eyes on them. Gee, they'd have to be pretty fucking cocksure that it was sealed tight and that we can find so many holes, right? But what would have forced their hand? Was it because they don't think they'll be in office forever? But they keep just getting re-elected. So that they were secure politically for a long time. They didn't need to bring in someone to... They didn't need to find a perpetrator at all. Right? And if they're worried about, oh, we lose control though if we don't make someone guilty now and just get them into prison... I mean, then you've got the appeal system. It just keeps going on, and then new law enforcement comes in. Maybe you no longer have power over them. You know, you're going to be exposed. It's just... So that's why in a community post I said, you know, gosh, you know, this is all pretty much pushing me toward Richard Allen being guilty. When, you know, all really I think that anyone should be able to say without seeing a lot of other evidence is he looks like the guy on the bridge. And apparently he said he was there. And apparently it's at the right time. And apparently we don't know what else he was doing for the rest of the afternoon. And apparently nobody else seems to be viable, even though, you know, we've got all of these theories and things like that. But, you know, you can't say without a reasonable doubt that he didn't have someone there. But, you know, you've got to think about the issue of all these people. Where are the witness statements? How stealthy are they? You know, they'd still be seen somewhere and would have... and then to bring them back is relying on, okay, being so connected to law enforcement leaving, making sure that every member of the public had actually left. Even if a search is called off, you can't stop private citizens who aren't anything to do with law enforcement, anything to do with your groups, whatever they are. Can't stop them from still being out in the woods. You can't stop neighbours from being able to see you. Sorry, they must be involved as well. Everybody's involved, so that you can then stealthily bring these girls back and stage the scene at 2 p.m. on February the 14th, the morning of. It's something to do with a ritual that involves blood sacrifice, but they actually weren't sacrificed on that day. Of course, unless they were held in a shed, actually killed there, except some of Libby's blood's at the scene. Oh my God. And it doesn't help when places like, you know, some barns are now pulled down, and it's not that there might not be this mystery. It's not that there isn't corruption. But is it corruption that fits? Do the mysteries fit? And people are very persuasive. You know, they want to, for their own reasons. Geez, maybe some of them really believe it, you know. Maybe some of them really believe it. Some people, it's tricky because they talk about some real things, but then some utter bullshit, and they're clearly unhinged. and they are being unhinged on other cases. And actually, if one in particular hadn't gone over to the Idaho 4 case, to Brian Koberger's situation, and wasn't running her operation to do with, how can I say it, if she wasn't applying her evil genius to that case, if she had just left it to Delphi, there would be a lot more, concern maybe for Delphi. But you see what she's doing with Brian Koberger and Idaho 4 case. So Kaylee, Ethan, Maddie, and Zana, I think, 4 uni students killed in Idaho, apparently by this guy, Brian Koberger, who apparently left a knife sheath there with his DNA on the inside, touch DNA, a print on the inside of the clasp, and that was under Maddie, but, apparently committed this bloody quadruple homicide. But she is running amok all over there. You should see what is going on there. Don't, actually. And it's flying in the face of some much more powerful evidence than we have, here in Delphi to do with Richard Allen. Because, so far we haven't seen a lot of evidence against Richard Allen, right? And a lot of it's hinging on this Dan Doolin and his statement that he's taken. We need to see the evidence of the day that he went. The interesting thing is, if this is true, if he's gone and if he's thought, I better get ahead of the game because I saw those girls on the bridge and I saw the woman on the trail, and what if they came into CVS? I better just hop in. I better just go and say, hey, I was there, but I didn't see anything. And then the video comes out of Bridge Guy. He must go, oh fuck. So what happened? He didn't come forward again and say, you know how I told you that I was there? I just want to make sure you know, right? That wasn't me. I'll show you what I was wearing. This is what I was wearing. And afterwards, look. You could say on the 15th, 16th, when did we first see that video? Was it straight away? Was it a week later? Whatever. He must have seen that. I would have gone, oh shit, I've gone and told them I'm there. And now look at that. And that kind of looks like me. It's not me. Wouldn't you go back to the war room, to the law office, to the sheriff's department? Wouldn't you go up to Tobe and say, I went and told Dan Doolin I was there. I just want to make sure you're not going to come and knock on my door. He must have been shitting himself, thinking that they were going to knock on his door. Now, why he wouldn't throw away his clothing, I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe the Carhartt jacket that was taken from his home is not one that was worn on the bridge, if it was by Richard Allen, right? But, he must have been thinking, holy shit. And there are rumors that very soon after, still in February, that he ended up going into rehab, that he had terrible drinking because he was known, there had been a domestic dispute, I think there had been law enforcement called around to a disturbance and alcohol was involved and that sort of thing, right, around the time. And then there's talk that actually got checked into a facility. But again, this could just be, people trying to create these narratives. They really enjoy doing that. People just love putting these narratives out there. But we don't know, right? But that might be true. So we'd have to see, was he continuously at CVS? Was there a break? And if there was a break, was he on holiday somewhere? Where was he? Can we see that he was in a facility, a rehab facility, mental health facility? But there's that rumor, And if it was him that's come forward and said to Dan Doolin, this was me, he has said nothing since. He has said absolutely nothing. He hasn't spoken about it in, what was that bar called? Jimmy's, JK's, J something. JC's. It's closed down now, but you know, that was the snooker bar or the billiard bar, whatever. And that's the bar that is in the photo where he's got the young bridge guy sketched behind him, right? But he hasn't said anything, you know. And lots of people that were there, that interviewed for documentaries, that interviewed by news stations, that interviewed by YouTubers, they are interviewed by Delphi residents. They are at least known, not little Richard Allen. And we did have a unidentified man, didn't we, on the bridge, and who might have not realized that he was on video, which is why he's left the phone, and which is why he hasn't cared, because it certainly seems like he didn't know. If someone's come forward, they didn't know they were on film. And then if they didn't know and they've come forward and then they know they're on film, they have kept mum about it. He must have thought this is absolutely nuts. And then you might think that's going to look suspicious if I change anything, if I leave town. And he's just kept laying low or just living his life. But he's not talking about his visit to the trails, really. He's not talking about it with law enforcement again. You wonder about the conversations with Kathy. I've made videos about that, about possible codependency and that sort of thing. But, you know, why is it? So Dan Doolan, he is an asshole, but he's not necessarily committing hate crimes, unless, of course, he's something to do with Flora. I can't remember his relationship with Flora. I think maybe there is something there, but everyone's doing everything. Flora's just down the road from Delphi. It's a few minutes drive, you know, and they're in the same county. And if you're a law enforcement officer, this is all your same beat. But is it because he was told by Liggett and Holman, let's just keep this one to ourselves? I don't know what that serves, but, you know, maybe they wanted, you know, people will say they wanted to use Delphi to, you know, use it for their own gain for as long as possible or something. And they're saying Mike Paddy's in on that and everything, and yeah. I mean, but, you know, in every case, there's things that people do that you don't like, you know, getting so early onto social media and the speeches that they make, and oh, he's only a step-grandfather. And yeah, you know, when we don't like people or relate to them directly, or we're uncomfortable with them, it's easy to place guilt, isn't it, right? And that's how tricksters work, right? Because they get you to like them. They're likable, they're charming, but, you know, witty, charming people do awful things. And when people are sort of unlikable or unbelievable, or they're just awkward, or they just make you feel a certain way, yeah, you want to just place blame, sometimes with good reason, but sometimes it's your bias. And unfortunately, for Abby and Libby, you know, there's plenty surrounding them, these innocent girls, there's plenty surrounding them that are doing them a disservice, right, in some ways. In others, you know, it's because of the family, mainly the Paddy family, German family, that is the reason why they have just kept the focus while there's a lot of attention, a lot of people trying to help them solve it, because they have fucking gotten out there. Galen Rose fucked off to Florida. Now, maybe because, did she feel frightened because she's black and she's in this place where, you know, she's not really feeling welcome? I don't know. I don't think she'd lived there that very long, right? The police say that she's not forthcoming with who she was seeing, who was at the house. There's accelerant found there. The smoke detector is pictured on the stairway. There's so much, Flora's just, it's awful. These poor girls trapped in this upstairs bedroom. We haven't heard the 911 call. We know that people in the fire department at the time were absolutely racist, you know, and because there have been other suspicious fires and people dying, because, you know, people die in Carroll County when they're sort of trying to stand up for things, you know, it casts suspicion on everything, which is you know, it could be very unfair, because people were risking their lives to try and save those girls, and, you know, few people are saying that it's the very people that were there saving it, you know. They're saying, I think Erskine was seen throwing a Molotov cocktail in the window, and then it exploded, and there's Dillinger and Yoda as players as well. Yoda got really injured, but he seemed to be the only person really fucking trying to hustle and do something. He had to drive back to the fire station to get everyone activated. So, you know, we need to know. I used to think, oh, well, maybe they weren't. There was no one there, Matt. What were they doing? They had to maybe come from all over as volunteers, and that's the delay. Anyway, this won't be making sense the way I'm speaking so disjointedly, but if you know it, you know it. But, you know, we need that 911 call, don't we? We need to know how it was handled and what was said. Citizens want to know. I mean, it's an unsolved case, and so people should know what happened. But was it a stupid accident? Was it arson? Was it arson by very surprising people? Never thinking it would go that far? Was it? Yeah. You know, the house was it wasn't a well-maintained home. It was a multi-dwelling. I think the other people living there had just moved out. It was sort of divided, so I think the upstairs, I think there was only really a bedroom up there for Galen Rose and a bathroom, and maybe she slept downstairs. Was she asleep on the sofa? But law enforcement is sort of hinting that she had someone there that she's not naming, and that was the father of one of the children. Her 4 children, every child had a different father, so it's sort of a bit complicated, I guess. But I think even Carter has hinted that, you know, she won't give the information. And I mean, she does say some very funny things when she's finally been talking, but who knows? I mean, she's fully traumatized. She's just been taken out of one universe and put in another, into another, where she just suddenly is very alone. There must be no more desolation than losing every single one of your daughters. No smiles, no, just nothing. You must feel like a zombie. You know, maybe that's why she ran away to Florida, and maybe she felt very unsafe to advocate for her girls. But, you know, it's just a completely different thing to DELPHI, and now we've got DELPHI maybe solved and Flora Fire nowhere near, you know, legally solved. So anyway, I've prattled on for 2 hours and 53 minutes and 39 seconds. So I'm going to go. And I don't know if I've achieved what I meant to here with this, but what I was trying to do was just say, okay, well, these are some of the jigsaw pieces. Do they really go together under examination with everything else that's being said and what you're told to believe? Does it make sense? How would it make sense? What would you keep? What would you discard? Not everything can be true. Not everybody mentioned is involved. What is it? How does this work? What makes sense? So these are the things that I'm thinking, okay, well, we know and we're told this, and this. What else do we need to know? How does this connect? Is it possible? Does it make sense? So if you were an Odinist and you didn't kill these girls, you'd be fucked off. Maybe you would like to go and muscle around some little squirm who you believe has killed these girls and then try to frame you. You might only be pissed off because they were white girls and not black girls, but all the same. So thank you, everybody. I will go. Thank you for chatting nicely to yourselves. Thank you for modding, Kit and Mark, and if there's another mod, but thank you. You've done a wonderful job, and a perfect job. And yeah, I'll speak to you later. Take care. Hopefully just put something in the comment section. If anything that I've started talking about triggers ideas or thoughts, or you've got ideas of your own, obviously, but yeah, do you find that interesting, about the patches appearing, or people in the prison appearing in March wearing these patches? Alan then goes and confesses April the 3rd, and by April the 5th, we're being told that he's being bullied and treated very badly and unfairly. And his health is deteriorating and he stops talking to his wife. Is it really because he's fair? Well, is he in fear? Quite rightfully, because he knows he's done a boo-boo. Guilty people go downhill mentally too, right? And it's not, I think a lot of Letitia Stouck's mental decline, although she was already sick in the head, because she's caught and she's desperate and she's acting like an absolutely mad animal, right? Can be the same for Richard Allen. A lot of criminals go from very robust to these grey, hunched, ill people on oxygen, and they can be the worst predators, and they're the ones that bring the pity party, and they're known to then be the worst. They turn out to be the worst serial killers, the worst serial molesters and rapists. It's like Harvey Weinstein. Look at the people that do this. Then they suddenly spring back to robustness in prison, right? So, criminal malingering is a real thing. And Alan's not having booze. I hope if he's an innocent man, and he might be, and we have to look at that too, that he is safe. And then thinking about everything, then why would he be safe in county jail over a prison? And it's Tobe Leesenby, and he's not the Liggett, he's not the Holman, is he? Tobe is the one that's saying, maybe keep him in Westville. We don't really have the resources here, he's saying. No, he's right, he doesn't have the resources, but he's also maybe actually being a decent person. People are making a lot about his bullet. They want to see the bullet on the counter that was on his desk in interviews, and they're throwing Tobe in it. What if he's the good guy? What if he's trying to keep Richard Allen safe, right? He doesn't want him in his county jail. There was talk that he could go to Cass County Jail because they've got better resources. It's a bigger facility. But Cass County Jail didn't want him. And that jail is problematic too. Westville, it's high security. Officers just from Carroll County, I don't think they can just walk in. Okay, they can just walk in to the little building on Main West Road in Delphi, and anything could happen to Richard Allen. He could have a little accident. He could accidentally hang himself. He could accidentally do a lot of things, right? He could accidentally fall over and, hit his head and die, right? So I feel like It's so crazy that people are screaming for his innocence and that he's been set up by people in Carroll County, and they go, at least put him in Carroll County. The moronic nature of that. They just can't hear themselves, right? So it's that moronic aspect to things that makes people push back quite a bit more when you might actually agree with some of the things. You can see the facts. You're not stupid. You know Doolan's an arsehole, and that Liggett, you know, is mucking around with funds for his election campaign, and that the council are letting him get away with it. But and so many other things. It's not that you don't see it, but it just pushes you towards, you know, away from believing anything they say. Because anyway, I'm prattling. What is wrong with me? Why do I find it so hard to end these? I'm just going to push the button. So I'm being a dick. See you later.